I had a brief fling with Louis once. We were studying abroad, and I thought he was just a regular international student. He was handsome and in great shape, so on a whim, I went after him. After a shameless 6-month romance, I found out he was from a super wealthy family. Not only that, but he was famously a sworn bachelor. So, I hid the fact that I was pregnant and told him I wanted to break up. After making me confirm it 3 times, he lowered his eyes and nodded. Fine. From now on, we're strangers. But we couldn't stay strangers. For years later, we met again. He was the renowned younger son of the powerful family. And I was his cousin's fiancée. I met Louis when I was studying in Melbourne. He was at the Great Ocean Road with some friends, and I was just sitting on the beach, bored out of my mind, when I spotted him. Louis was ridiculously good-looking. The line of his jaw was clean and sharp, and the curve of his long eyelashes was dangerously tempting. The sea breeze lifted the hem of his shirt, giving a tantalizing glimpse of his waistline that I couldn't look away from. I guess that's what they call love at first sight. In a moment of madness, I jogged over and stood in his way. Interested in making a new friend? Louis turned to look at me, raising an eyebrow with a hint of surprise. A friend for what? He asked. You're always a little bolder when you're in a foreign country with no one you know. I was blunt. To see if we could become more than friends. I could hear his friends catcalling in the background. Louis coughed awkwardly. He hesitated for a moment when I pulled out my phone for him to scan, but he added me. All right, let's get to know each other first. Louis was not an easy guy to win over. After adding me on socials, he completely ignored me. Even when I came up with lame excuses to chat, he'd just leave me on read. I slowly realized he just wasn't interested in me. He'd only added me that day to save me from public embarrassment. So, I gave up and stopped trying to contact him. The second time I saw Louis was at a school mixer. He was wearing a crisp white shirt, standing off to the side, exuding a cool, almost untouchable vibe. I spotted him right away, but since we weren't really friends, I didn't go over to say hi. I spent the whole mixer trailing an upperclassman from my program. The whole time, I felt a pair of eyes on me, on and off. When the upperclassman accidentally spilled a drink on my dress and was frantically trying to wipe it off, I found the source of the stare. It was Louis. His lips were pressed into a thin line as he stared at us, his expression grim. On my way to the restroom, a hand shot out and pulled me into a corner. Louis leaned in, his narrow, cold eyes looking down at me as he asked in a low voice, "Didn't you say you wanted to be more than friends? Why are you acting like you don't know me today?" The annoyance in his tone was obvious. Even angry, his face was still stunning. As he spoke, his Adam's apple bobbed, making him even more attractive. I tilted my head, looking at him curiously. "Louis, are you jealous?" He froze for a second, biting his lip, but he didn't deny it. I couldn't help but smile. You need to have the right to be jealous. In what capacity are you getting jealous right now? His face paled, and he stared at me, his grip on my wrist tightening. I stood on my toes, our noses almost touching, and whispered, "I'll give you one more chance." "Louis, are you interested in being my boyfriend?" "I'll give you 3 seconds to think about it." 3, 2. Before I could get to 1, I saw his lips so close to mine and, on impulse, I leaned up and kissed him. I only meant for it to be a light peck, but I forget which one of us lost control and started to take over. He pressed me against the wall, holding the back of my head as our lips and tongues tangled in a fierce, urgent kiss. Even his yes was muffled between our breathless pants. He said, "Jasmine, let's be together." I think my attraction to Louis was purely physical. Every time I saw him, I couldn't help but want to get closer, to have more. But Louis was clearly different. He was so self-controlled and reserved that he'd even book 2 separate rooms when we traveled together. If I couldn't feel his reaction when we kissed, I might have thought he had a problem downstairs. The day our relationship finally escalated was his birthday. I'd booked a sea view room and was curled up in his arms watching a movie. Halfway through, I took off my cardigan, revealing the bunny girl costume underneath, and placed his hand on the fluffy bunny tail. I felt Louis's breath catch in his throat. But he didn't pull away, he just lowered his eyes and let me do my thing. That emboldened me. I grabbed his collar and nibbled on his Adam's apple, then lifted his shirt to trace the muscles of his stomach and waist. Louis's body was just as amazing as I'd imagined. His pecs were well defined, his abs were tight, and he had that perfect V-cut. But his self-control was insane. Even at this point, with his chest heaving and his body burning up, he didn't make a move. Wearing the bunny ears, I looked up at him. "If you're not into this, I'll just go." With that, I gave his abs a little bite and gracefully got up to leave. The second my hand touched the doorknob, he couldn't hide it anymore. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his strong arms wrapping around me from behind. He bit my shoulder and asked in a hoarse voice, "Jasmine, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" Teasing me, then threatening to leave. How can you be so wicked? That night, Louis finally shattered his mask of cool self-control, and we were tangled together until dawn. Louis and I dated like that for 6 months. We went to the Pink Lake in Western Australia, Hyde Park in Sydney, and Bruny Island in Tasmania, holding each other trembling in hotel rooms. I thought he was the perfect partner. But when I happily posted a photo of us on my social media, a comment underneath made me freeze. "Jasmine, you're something else. You actually managed to land the younger son of the Gu family from Beijing." Studying abroad can temporarily mask differences in social class. Even though Louis wore expensive watches and designer clothes, I always just thought he was a bit richer than the average person. I never imagined his family wasn't just rich, but powerful and influential to this degree. The kind of elite family you only read about in novels. As if that wasn't enough, Louis was also famously against marriage. And when I found this out, I was holding a pregnancy test. It showed 2 lines. About a month ago, things had gotten a little too intense with Louis, and the condom broke. I took the morning after pill right away, but I guess it didn't work. I didn't know if he was really as against marriage as the rumors said, so that night, I decided to test the waters. "Louis, I passed by a bridal shop today, and the dress in the window was gorgeous. Speaking of wedding dresses, when do you think you'll get married?" He clearly didn't like the topic. His brow furrowed, and he just said, "I don't want to get married." "What about kids? You don't want kids either?" At that, his frown deepened. No. Logically, I should have dropped the subject right there. But I couldn't give up. I had to try one more time. "What if someone got pregnant with your child? What would you do?" After a brief pause, he told me, "I wouldn't let anyone get pregnant with my child. If it happened, they'd have to get an abortion." He obviously didn't want to continue the conversation. He walked over, wrapped his arms around me familiarly, and gave my lips a few gentle pecks, his eyes darkening. I knew it was the prelude to him wanting more. We'd always been great in bed, but this time, as he swept me up into his arms, I stopped him. "Not tonight." It wasn't that I couldn't, I just didn't want to. I'd seen a doctor before, who told me I had a condition that made it extremely difficult to conceive. If I terminated this pregnancy, the chances of me ever getting pregnant again were almost 0. My family life has always been thin. My parents passed away when I was young, and I've always wanted a child of my own. Louis was good-looking, emotionally stable, and intelligent, the perfect father for my child. After a lot of thought, I decided to keep the baby. But my relationship with Louis. I figured if I wanted this child, we'd have to break up. I would give birth to the child and raise it myself, so it wouldn't get in his way. The day I broke up with him was the day before we were supposed to fly back home. Louis was packing his suitcase, planning our trip back to Beijing. Beijing is super hot and humid in the summer. We'll rest at the hotel in the afternoons and go out in the evening. I'll take you to walk through the old neighborhoods, we'll pass the Bell and Drum Towers, and at night we can go to a bar by the lake and listen to some music. I cut off his rambling and said the words that had been weighing on my heart. "Louis, let's break up. He froze, his hands stopping mid-motion. What did you say? I bought a ticket straight to Austin for tomorrow. I'm not going to Beijing. And also, we're breaking up. A guy like Louis had probably never been dumped before. So when it came to breaking up, he was persistent, demanding a reason. There were so many reasons. For instance, I was pregnant with his child, and he didn't want children. Or how I was dating with marriage in mind, and he had no intention of marrying. Or the fact that our family backgrounds were worlds apart, a mismatch from the start. But I couldn't bring myself to tell him any of that. Under his relentless questioning, I finally braced myself and said, "What if I told you I'm just tired of you? Is that reason enough? Tired of me?" I nodded. Yeah, tired. You're like a lychee, sweet and tempting when you first peel it. But once you've had too much, it just gets sickeningly sweet. His eyes filled with anger. He grabbed my shoulders, his voice tight. Jasmine, say that again. I looked at him, feigning indifference. What? After sleeping together so many times, aren't you tired of it yet? Louis stared at me for a long, long time that day, as if trying to see right through me. As the sky began to lighten, he asked me one more time, "Are you serious?" "I'm serious." He didn't say another word, just quietly watched me put on my backpack and grab my suitcase. As I reached the door, he let out a bitter laugh. Jasmine, do you even have a heart? You were the one who said you liked me, and now you're the one who says you're tired of me. Was I just some toy for you to play with? He looked down, his eyes slightly red, the knuckles of his hands white. He looked like he was about to shatter. My heart softened for a moment, but before I could say anything, I heard him say, each word deliberate and serious, "Jasmine, I wish I'd never met you. From now on, if we see each other, we're strangers." In the end, he didn't say a single word to ask me to stay. I bit my lip and nodded gently. Okay. Then I pulled my suitcase out the door and got on the plane back to Austin. Our breakup was clean. We deleted all contact information. Back home, we were a country apart, separated by thousands of miles. I never heard another word about Louis. He completely vanished from my life. 8 months later, I gave birth to Nick. Nick was an easy baby. He didn't cry much and was very independent, so he wasn't a lot of trouble. His face shape was like mine, but his features, especially his eyes and brows, were all Louis. I raised him quietly, on my own. In my mind, Louis would never know he had a son. But I miscalculated. When Nick was 3, father and son met. I made a good friend in Austin over the last few years. He's got this authentic East Coast accent, is super generous with money, and happens to be a gay man, and a bottom. Apparently, his family was constantly pressuring him to get married and have kids. His parents had given him an ultimatum: if he didn't bring a girlfriend home this year, they'd cut him off. He was terrified and, after a lot of thought, he came to me. He begged me to play his girlfriend and for Nick to play his son. That way, when he brought us home, he'd solve both problems at once. Good-looking people tend to look alike, he argued. If you look closely, your son kind of looks like me, especially around the eyes. If we say he's my son, we could probably fool a lot of people. We'll say I moved to Austin for you, and that we already have a kid together. The reason I never brought you to Beijing was because you didn't want to meet the in-laws, and I was respecting your wishes. Dylan came to Austin to find a top, which had absolutely nothing to do with me. Naturally, I didn't want to get involved in his mess. But when he transferred $200,000 into my account to hire me for the act, I pathetically agreed. I was idealistic in college, but after entering the real world, I learned how hard it is to make money. Especially when you're raising a kid. I just couldn't refuse that kind of cash. I silently apologized to Dylan's parents in my heart and took Nick to Beijing. Dylan told me all I had to do was meet his parents, have one meal with them, and then stay in Beijing for a week, and the job would be done. The demands weren't excessive, so I agreed. On the plane to Beijing, I thought about him. I was scared I'd run into him there. But then I figured I was overthinking it. There are so many people in Beijing, what were the odds of bumping into him again? People's lives don't cross like that. Nick sat beside me obediently, listening carefully as I explained what he needed to do. He nodded firmly. Don't worry, Mom. I remember. I told him we had to help Uncle Dylan with a little act. He's a smart kid and remembers things after being told once, so I wasn't worried he'd slip up. After we got to Beijing, Dylan informed me that his parents were throwing a welcome party and had invited a few relatives and friends. I thought a welcome party just meant dinner in a private room, but I never expected Dylan's family to have so many relatives that they needed to book a grand hall for the banquet. I froze the moment I walked in. The banquet hall was magnificent, with crystal chandeliers casting a dazzling glow, a picture of pure luxury. Dylan whispered to me, "Forgot to tell you, my family has a little money. But don't feel pressured. My parents are just rich and gullible. Just act natural, you'll be able to fool them." There was no time to curse him out or back out now. I had to just brace myself and go through with it. The moment Nick and I walked in, we were surrounded. People were pulling us in every direction, talking non-stop. Dylan's parents, especially, peppered me with questions. Luckily, Dylan and I had gone over potential questions beforehand, so I managed to answer them all. Later, Dylan's parents were holding Nick, completely smitten. The moment I saw this child, I knew he had our family's blood. Look at those eyes and brows, he looks so much like Dylan. Nick was sharp too, calling them grandpa and grandma, which made the old couple ecstatic. It seemed like we had successfully pulled it off. I breathed a sigh of relief and went to the restroom to touch up my makeup. That's when everything changed. Dylan sent me a text saying his cousin had graced the party with his presence. This cousin was the heir the family was grooming, gradually taking over the family business and holding countless connections. If I could meet him, it would only be beneficial for me. He urged me to come back to the party hall quickly to greet his cousin and not to slight him. So, I quickly powdered my face and rushed back to the hall. By the time I got there, his cousin had already arrived. He was wearing a well-tailored dark suit, standing tall and straight, with his back to me, talking to Dylan. I recognized him in a single glance. It was Louis. I never imagined that the cousin Dylan was talking about would be Louis. The moment I saw him, my mind went completely blank. But before I could compose myself, Nick saw me and waved excitedly. "It's Mommy. Mommy's back." Louis turned at the sound of his voice, his gaze falling on me. The moment our eyes met, I felt a wave of dizziness. Dylan quickly came to my side and introduced me. "Cousin, this is my girlfriend, Jasmine. She's shy and refused to come to Beijing. It took a lot of convincing to finally get her here." Then he nudged me, "Jasmine, what are you spacing out for? Say hi to my cousin. For years apart, and this is how we meet again." Time hadn't left much of a mark on Louis. Other than a slightly colder demeanor and a sharper jawline, he hadn't changed much. Louis looked at me, too. His dark eyes were cool and detached, without a hint of emotion. He looked at me the way you'd look at a stranger. Right. When we broke up, Louis had said that if we ever met again, we'd be strangers. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. We met, but we couldn't be strangers. With Dylan's prodding and in front of all the relatives, I had no choice but to nod at him. "Cousin." Louis didn't respond to the title. His gaze only grew colder. The atmosphere became a bit awkward. To make matters worse, Nick toddled over and chirped, "Hi, Uncle Louis." He seemed oblivious to the intimidating aura coming off Louis and reached out to tug on his sleeve. "Uncle Louis, you're so handsome." Nick was small and had been standing behind Dylan's parents, so Louis hadn't gotten a clear look at his face. Now, the boy had run right up to him, looking up with wide, hopeful eyes. Under the bright lights, his resemblance to Louis was undeniable. I was terrified and wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Louis looked down at him, his breath catching. He slowly knelt, bringing himself to Nick's eye level. With their faces side by side, their features, especially their eyes, were practically identical. Dylan's mom was the first to notice. "Wow," she said, "Nick and Louis look so much alike." Dylan's dad took a closer look and nodded. "They really do. They say nephews resemble their uncles. I guess it can be true for grandnephews and their granduncles too." Not content with her own observation, Dylan's mom called over other relatives. "Come look, everyone. Family is family. They share the same face." Rich and gullible indeed, not a shred of suspicion. I wanted to pull Nick back, but I was blocked by the crowd. Amid the chatter, I heard Louis's voice soften as he asked Nick, "What's your name?" "Nick." "And how old are you?" My heart leaped into my throat. Nick was a little over 3. If he answered truthfully, Louis would just have to do a little math to realize I was pregnant with him while we were dating in Australia, and that Nick was his son. He was so against marriage and kids, I had no idea how he'd react to the news. If I could, I'd want him to never find out. Nick reached up and straightened Louis's collar, answering in his small, sweet voice, "I'm almost 3. Hearing this, Louis's eyes lowered, and he released his hands from Nick's shoulders. "Almost 3. Then, judging by the timeline, the child couldn't be his. Just then, Dylan ran over, scooped Nick up in one arm, and slung the other around me, showing off to Louis with a grin. "Cousin, look how beautiful my Jasmine is, and how cute my son is. I've got a wife and a son now, no more nagging about getting married and having kids. And then there's you, still not married. Seeing how happy I am, you must be so jealous, right? Want me to introduce you to someone?" Seeing Louis's face darken, Dylan seemed to remember something and slapped his own mouth. "Ah, cousin, I'm sorry. I forgot you don't believe in marriage and hate kids. My brain must have short-circuited. I shouldn't have said that." Louis ignored him, simply exchanging a few pleasantries with Dylan's parents before leaving early. From beginning to end, he never glanced my way again. He truly meant what he said. From now on, we were strangers. Nick snuggled into my arms and whispered, "Mom, did I do a good job? I remembered everything you told me." Before we came, I told Nick that if anyone asked his age, he should say he's almost 3. Otherwise, it wouldn't line up with the story of Dylan being in Austin. I ruffled his hair. Then he said to me, "That uncle just now, he gave me this." He handed me what was in his palm. It was a peach-flavored hard candy. I have a sweet tooth and love candy. Back when we were dating, Louis always kept some candy on him. He never ate it himself, it was all for me. I never thought that after all these years apart, he'd still have that habit. By the time the party ended, it was already 10 at night. Nick was fast asleep on my shoulder. Dylan's parents wanted us to stay at their house, but after much persuasion from Dylan, they agreed to let Nick and me stay at a hotel. They instructed Dylan to make sure he got us back safely. Dylan agreed readily, but the moment we were outside the hotel, he told me conspiratorially, "I've got a date with a hot guy tonight, and I'm about to be late. I probably don't have time to take you back. Beijing is really safe. You'll be okay getting Nick back to the hotel by yourself, right?" I knew he was unreliable and wasn't counting on him anyway. Just as I was about to call a ride share, a Bentley pulled up and stopped in front of me. The window rolled down, revealing Louis's cold, handsome face. "Get in. I'll take you." I had no intention of getting tangled up with Louis again. But Dylan, not being the sharpest tool in the shed, opened the car door and pushed Nick and me inside. "Cousin, I've got something urgent to do, so I'll leave Jasmine and Nick with you. Thanks for taking them back to the hotel." With that, he slammed the door and rushed off to his date. I tried to get out, but Louis locked the doors and asked flatly, "Which hotel?" At this point, there was no use arguing. I told him the name of the hotel, and he turned the wheel and stepped on the gas. The car was silent except for the sound of Nick's steady breathing as he slept. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. The dim light obscured his features, but I could still make out the exquisite silhouette of his profile and the beautiful curve of his jaw. I remembered back in Australia, when Lewis would drive me around just like this. We'd be on the road to Tasmania in the spring, music playing, sunroof open, letting the fragrant breeze from the pastures fill the car. When the mood struck, we'd kiss passionately, clinging to each other's necks, gasping for air. Lewis's voice suddenly broke the silence, his tone neutral. "Why, Dylan?" I pursed my lips, not knowing how to answer. Then I heard him say, "Leaving you at the hotel entrance like that? What could be so urgent that it's more important than you? If I had a wife and kid, I'd drop anything for them. They'd always come first." I couldn't help but let out a small laugh, gently reminding him, "Lewis, you're a sworn bachelor. You won't have a wife and kids." He froze, his face paling slightly, and the rest of his words died in his throat. The car fell silent again. For the rest of the drive, he just quietly stepped on the gas. When we arrived at the hotel, I got out, holding Nick. Beijing was colder than Austin, and a gust of wind rustled Nick's hair. The little guy wasn't light, and my arms were getting numb. I couldn't hold him for much longer. Just as I was about to wake him, I saw Lewis take off his suit jacket, drape it over Nick, and naturally take him from my arms. Nick, half asleep, opened his eyes. When he saw it was Lewis, he didn't pull away but snuggled deeper into his arms. Lewis stiffened slightly, his expression complex as he looked at Nick. It was a mix of helplessness, affection, and regret. He just said softly, "Let him sleep. I'll carry him to the room." He carried Nick inside, carefully placed him on the bed, and tucked him in. Lewis was a true gentleman. He didn't linger in my room, leaving as soon as he was done. I thanked him politely, and he gave a calm nod and turned to leave. I figured this encounter was just a small blip in our lives. After tonight, we probably wouldn't see each other again. Perhaps seeing someone from my buried past brought back a flood of long-suppressed emotions. I greedily watched him for a few extra seconds, planning to close the door only after he was out of sight. But after taking a few steps, Lewis turned back. "Jasmine, I used to really hate kids." "And?" I asked, confused. "But I don't hate Nick. Because he's your son, I like him a lot." It was the first time in Beijing for both me and Nick. I had made a detailed itinerary before we came. Dylan was supposed to hang out with us, but he called me early in the morning. "Jasmine, I'm so sorry, I think I've found true love again. I can't hang out with you today. But don't worry, my cousin's free recently. He promised to show you and Nick around Beijing." I was stunned. Before I could refuse, someone called Dylan's name on the other end, and he quickly hung up. And Lewis was already waiting for me in the lobby. I thought for a moment and told him, "You should go handle your own stuff. Nick and I can just wander around. It's fine. I promised Dylan I'd look after you guys for these 2 days." I tried to refuse again, but he lowered his gaze and looked at me. "I promised to show you around Beijing back then. Let's just call this making up for that missed promise." With that, he took a long stride and walked out, holding Nick's hand. Nick turned back and waved excitedly at me. "Mom, hurry up." And just like that, I was in Lewis's car again. This time, there was a child safety seat in the back. He cleared his throat and explained, "I heard kids need to sit in these, so I bought one last night." Nick was a good boy. He climbed in himself, buckled the seatbelt, and asked as he did, "Mom, are we going to Universal Studios today?" "We are." Nick had been looking forward to Universal Studios for a long time. He held my hand and Lewis's hand, excitedly wandering around the park. We put on wizard robes and took pictures in the Harry Potter world, explored the Minion Land, and rode a roller coaster at sunset to watch the vibrant evening sky. Nick was out of breath from all the playing, and Lewis awkwardly wiped his sweat and handed him water. For a moment, I had the illusion that we were a normal family of 3. The absurd thought startled me, and I quickly shook my head to clear it. A full day of fun made Nick really like Lewis. On the way back, he chattered endlessly with him. Uncle Louis, I wish you could come back to Austin with me. I quickly tapped Nick on the head. Don't say things like that. It's okay, kids say the darndest things. With Louis's approval, Nick got even bolder, placing his small hand on Louis's shoulder. Uncle Louis, I don't know why, but I feel really close to you. I've never had a dad. Will you come back to Austin and be my dad? As the words left his mouth, Louis's hands on the steering wheel trembled slightly. Nick, what did you just say? Nick then remembered what I had told him and looked at me uneasily, not knowing how to answer. Jasmine, what does he mean he's never had a dad? I pulled Nick into my arms and explained, he's just a kid. He says whatever comes to his mind. You said it yourself, kids say the darndest things, right? He looked up at me, his narrow, cool eyes filled with a deep darkness. After a long moment, he suddenly asked, have you been doing well these years? Very well, I lied without batting an eye. Dylan has a great personality, he's good to me and Nick, and we're very happy. Just then, Dylan's call came through. Maybe because he had slipped up earlier, Nick was eager to make up for it. The moment the call connected, he yelled to Dylan, Dad. The car swerved sharply. Louis's lips were pressed into a thin line, his eyes filled with clear annoyance. My dear son, did you miss Daddy? Dylan's tone was also a bit exaggerated. He must have been with his family. I did, I missed you so much, Daddy. Nick played along enthusiastically. Probably to create the image of a loving couple for his parents, Dylan then called my name. Jasmine. For that $200,000, I swallowed my disgust. Yeah. I was too busy today and couldn't take care of you and Nick. Mom and Dad already chewed me out. I'll make it up to you both tomorrow. Jasmine, I love you the most, moi. You love me too, right? Quick, give me a kiss. I don't know how his mouth could form such cringe-worthy words. Before I could answer, Louis cut him off coldly. I'm driving. Don't be a distraction. Dylan was taken aback. Cousin, you're still there. Thanks so much for spending the whole day with my wife and son, I really appreciate it. Louis's lips tightened, his eyes fierce, his low voice suppressing his anger. I said, be quiet. Though Dylan wasn't the brightest, he could read the room and sensed Louis's bad mood. He immediately shut up and hung up the phone sheepishly. Okay, you guys talk. Jasmine, don't make my cousin mad. I'll come get you tomorrow. After the call ended, no one spoke in the car. Louis's expression was cold, his jawline tight, the knuckles of his fair, slender hands were prominent as he stepped on the gas, speeding up. He didn't say another word, his gaze dark and unreadable as it fell on me through the rearview mirror. Nick was a kid who fell asleep on schedule. By the time we got to the hotel, he was already fast asleep. Louis skillfully scooped him into his arms and carried him back to the room with long strides. After putting Nick down, he gently ruffled the little guy's hair, then turned and left without lingering. This time, I couldn't watch him leave because he closed the door directly, cutting off my view. He left in a hurry, probably because he was disgusted after hearing my conversation with Dylan and didn't want any more contact with me. That was fine by me. Let everything go back to the way it was, with both of us living our own lives peacefully. After I settled Nick in, I was about to go to bed when my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number from Beijing. I answered, and a familiar voice came through the receiver. Are you asleep? It was Louis. I was slightly taken aback. How did you get my number? I asked Dylan. You left your ID in my car when we went out today. Do you want to come get it? I rummaged through my bag and, sure enough, my ID was missing. I had to ask him, where are you? I'll come get it. Come out. I opened the door but didn't see him. Take 2 steps forward. It was strange, but I did as he said. But the hallway was empty. Where was he? The door to the suite next to mine suddenly opened. A hand shot out, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me into the room. My world spun as the door was shut behind me. Louis propped one hand on the door, the other pressing against my back, trapping me between him and the door. There was no escape. He whispered in my ear, his voice hoarse. "Jasmine," I got all dressed up. "Come take a look at me." I had never seen Louis like this. Back in Australia, even though our relationship got pretty shameless towards the end, Louis was always cool and restrained outside the bedroom. All his passion was reserved for that 2-meter-wide bed. But now, he was wearing only a white shirt, completely soaked, clinging to his body and outlining the bulging muscles of his chest underneath. A droplet of water slid down his sharp nose, landing on his prominent Adam's apple. His throat bobbed, and an overwhelming mix of pressure and pheromones filled the cramped space. I was momentarily mesmerized. Taking advantage of my daze, he leaned in, took my hand, and guided it under the hem of his shirt, placing my palm on his pec. Then, he slowly moved it down, tracing a circle over his hard abs before letting it rest on his sexy V-line. Since returning home, I'd been living a very tame life. I hadn't even been to a bar, let alone touched a man. I don't know if it was because it had been too long since I'd been tempted by a man's body, but I felt like Louis's physique was even better than it was 4 years ago. The feeling under my palm made me dazed, and I forgot to pull my hand away. "Jasmine, didn't you say you were tired of me? Why is your breathing so heavy? Why are your cheeks so red?" He whispered in my ear, his voice low, the end of his sentence rising. I tried hard to calm my breathing, but with him so close, it only got more erratic. It was as if my body had a memory of its own. The moment he got near, instead of pushing him away, it wanted to press closer. "Louis, where's my ID?" I asked through gritted teeth. He didn't answer my question, just looked down at me. "After you said you were tired of me, I did a lot of self-reflection. I thought maybe I really was boring and dull. I've learned a lot these past few years. I should be able to keep you interested for a while." I was taken aback. Realizing what he meant, my face turned even redder. What was all this? I forced myself to calm down and asked him again, "Where's my ID?" His long lashes cast a faint shadow on his eyelids. He looked at me intently, then suddenly reached out and pressed his thumb to my lower lip, tracing it heavily. "Jasmine, I want to kiss you." My mind was a mess. Forcibly suppressing the fluttering in my heart, I reminded him, "Louis, get a grip. I'm your cousin's girlfriend." He just gave a small, mocking laugh, unfazed. "That guy Dylan, besides his looks, has no redeeming qualities. You could actually be into him?" I nodded against my will. "Yes. But it seems like he doesn't like you. If he liked you, why would he leave you alone last night to go on a date? And why would he ditch you today for his true love?" I froze. "How did you know?" "Because the guy he went on a date with last night was someone I arranged." His tone was light, but there was no hint of a smile in his eyes. "I wasn't sure if you two were really together, so I had someone test the waters." He was exposed immediately. His preferences haven't changed. I wasn't planning on exposing him so soon. I wanted to spend more time with you, build up our connection. But he had the nerve to call you his wife and nick his son. When they're my wife and my son. Before the words had even faded, he lowered his head and kissed me without any warning. The kiss was hard, so much so that it made me frown in pain. I tried to pull away, but he held my waist tightly, as if trying to merge me into his body. My attraction to Louis really is physical. When we're apart, it's fine. But the moment we see each other, the feelings burst forth like a seed sprouting into a giant tree in an instant. My body is more honest than my brain. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already clinging tightly to his neck. "See, Jasmine? You still have feelings for me," Louis said, his deep eyes swirling with emotion. "So why not give me another try? I've never been with another woman besides you. This body is still clean. Give me another try, please." His tone was almost pleading. If this had been the old me, back when I was studying abroad, faced with this version of Louis, I would have just gone for it without a second thought. But now, all I could do was force myself to stay calm and frantically search for an excuse to refuse him. Don't be like this. The thing with Dylan might be fake, but having a son is real. If my son's father found out about this, he'd be angry. He stared at me for a long moment, then let out a choked laugh. Jasmine, Nick is my son. It wasn't a question. His tone was completely certain. I turned my head away, avoiding his gaze. No, he's not even 3 yet. How could he be your child? It's not good to teach a child to lie, he said, his eyelashes fluttering. I checked. He's over 3 years old. You got pregnant in Melbourne, didn't you? Lewis had investigated Nick's date of birth. The evidence was undeniable, I couldn't argue. Yes, I admitted, no longer trying to deny it. I looked at him seriously. It was wrong of me to hide Nick's birth from you. But I gave birth to him and raised him myself. I never planned on using him to get anything from you. We've been doing well these past few years, and I promise I won't disturb your life after we go back to Austin. Can you just pretend he never existed? Lewis pulled back slightly, frowning at me. How do you know I don't want to acknowledge this child? What if I want him in my life? But Lewis, have you forgotten? I looked at him, helping him remember. I asked you what you would do if you had a child. You told me without hesitation that you wouldn't let anyone have your child. And if they did, you'd make them get rid of it. Lewis was taken aback. Recalling that past conversation, he finally understood. So you were already pregnant then? Yes. I have a condition that makes it hard to conceive. If I had an abortion, I might never have had a child of my own, so I wanted to keep him. Since the topic was open, I decided to lay everything bare. But you weren't willing, so we had to break up. Lewis, I really liked you. The excuse about being tired of you was just something I made up to leave with some dignity. I left you because I was afraid that if you found out I was pregnant, you would use your influence to force me to have an abortion. I come from a humble background, nothing compared to your family's status. I was also afraid your family would say I was trying to use the baby to climb the social ladder. Sometimes you can live without face, but other times, face is more important than anything. I took a deep breath and let out everything I had been holding in, both what needed to be said and what didn't. And you're a sworn bachelor who's child-free. Even though my choice is different from yours, I respect your life plan. Some conflicts can't be resolved, so it's better to go our separate ways. Lewis, just pretend this whole episode never happened. I'll take Nick back in a few days. I'm sorry for disrupting your plans, and I'll do my best to minimize the impact on you. I don't know which of my words set him off, but he pursed his lips, lowered his eyes, and said nothing more. Forgetting about my ID, I turned the doorknob and ran out. This time, Lewis didn't stop me. He just watched me leave in silence, his head bowed, his eyes dark and unreadable, lost in thought. After I got back to my room, I realized my lips were numb, my body was weak, and my reflection in the mirror showed flushed cheeks. My heart was still pounding uncontrollably. We really shouldn't have met again. The feelings that had been dormant for years were now growing wildly, and for a moment, I couldn't suppress them. All I could do was let time wear them down. The next day, Dylan came early to pick up me and Nick. To be precise, he came to pick up Nick. I don't know what happened, but he seemed to be avoiding my gaze. Whenever I got close to him, he would back away like I was the plague. Hey, don't come any closer. We need to maintain some distance. I'm taking Nick out to play today. I'll bring him back to you tomorrow. I was confused. What are you talking about? Of course I'm coming with you. You don't have time. You have other important things to do today. With that, the elevator doors opened, and he took Nick's hand and bolted. I was completely bewildered. Just as I was about to follow, Lewis walked over. I asked him to take Nick out. Let's talk, just the two of us. But hadn't we said everything we needed to say yesterday? I didn't understand what else there was to talk about. He looked at me, cleared his throat, and opened the briefcase in his hand. Inside was a thick stack of papers. I'd been seeing a therapist all these years. This is my medical file. You can take a look. But he didn't hand me the file right away. He said he wanted to take me somewhere first. Louis took me to a villa complex. The houses were scattered against a backdrop of mountains and water. Do you live here? I asked him. He shook his head and pointed to a villa. A middle-aged man was lounging on a rocking chair in the front garden while a woman fanned him. That's my dad, Louis told me. Is the woman next to him your mom? I asked instinctively. No, that's my father's mistress, Louis said, his tone devoid of emotion. You see this complex? The first 2 rows, a total of 8 houses, were all bought by my father for his mistresses. The youngest one is younger than me. The rich really do live differently. I didn't know what to say. After a moment, I said, your mom must be very sad. You should spend more time with her. No. To my surprise, Louis shook his head and pointed to the back 3 rows. My mother has lovers too. Her current favorite is still in college. Those back rows were arranged by my mother for her lovers. I was speechless. My parents had an arranged marriage, common among wealthy families. These marriages are just for producing an heir with both family bloodlines. Once that's done, the mission is complete, and they can go their separate ways. So, ever since I can remember, my parents have had a constant stream of partners. They never came home, just left me with the nanny. When I was little, I envied the security guard's son. His parents adored him, always thought of him when they had good food or fun toys, and would pick him up from school. One time he got sick, and his parents stayed up all night with him, so worried. Unlike me. Whenever I was sick, it was just the nanny. My parents couldn't stand each other, they'd fight like crazy whenever they met. As a child, I couldn't understand why a marriage could be like that, why people would have a child and not raise it properly. Over time, I developed a revulsion to marriage and a dislike for children. It was a physical aversion. The autumn wind blew, pushing his bangs away from his forehead. He turned his head slightly to look at me, changing the subject. Actually, that day on the Great Ocean Road when you ran up and asked for my number, my heart started beating strangely fast. My rational mind told me not to get into a relationship. If I didn't want to get married, I shouldn't lead a girl on. That's why I never replied to any of your messages. But your daily good morning and good night messages, your little ramblings about your life, and the forced topics you came up with, I read every single one of them over and over. When I saw you at the mixer, laughing and talking with another guy, I knew I couldn't control my feelings for you anymore. I wanted to be close to you, but I was afraid to possess you, afraid I'd hold you back. I knew I had psychological issues. I'd never thought about getting help before, but after meeting you, I wanted to become a normal person. He handed me the thick stack of papers. It was his file from his therapist. Louis had been going to therapy 2 to 3 times a week. When we broke up, saying we should be strangers was just something I said out of anger. For these 4 years, I've been actively seeking treatment and working hard to learn new things. Jasmine, I never gave up on you. I apologize for what happened 4 years ago. But even back then, if I had known you were pregnant, I wouldn't have had the heart to make you get rid of it. I would have tried to accept the arrival of a new life. I suppose different upbringings shape different personalities. Ordinary people desire the luxurious life of the wealthy, while some of the wealthy crave the simple warmth of an ordinary family. What was normal for me had become a deep-seated issue for him. Do you want to see the results of my treatment? He asked me. Curious, I nodded, and he led me to the car. He leaned over to fasten my seatbelt, and his scent suddenly enveloped me. His kiss followed, like a spring tide with rain, leaving me with no power to resist. I even subconsciously tilted my head up to meet him. I don't know how long we kissed. As I leaned against his chest, breathless, he touched the corner of my mouth and said with certainty, Jasmine, you still like me. I did still like him. After all, once you've seen the ocean, it's hard to be impressed by a stream. His specs were just too good. The moment we met, the feelings were impossible to hide. Good. I like you too. Louis drove all the way to City Hall. I was stunned. Although I had already guessed what he was planning, I couldn't help but ask, why are we here? Because Nick wants a dad, and I want a wife. I couldn't help but laugh. But aren't you a sworn bachelor? You are the exception to my rule. Because of you, I really want to get married now. Even though a storm was raging in my heart, I remained seated in the passenger seat and reminded him, our family backgrounds don't match. You said it yourself, your circle is all about arranged marriages between powerful families. Louis seemed to find my words amusing. I'm different. First, I'm in charge of the family business now, so I don't have to follow those stupid rules. Second, for a sworn bachelor like me to be willing to get married, and with a child already, my parents would be too grateful to you to even think of objecting. The barriers between us seemed to have suddenly vanished. He just asked me one thing, Jasmine, do you still want me? As he spoke, his eyes were as beautiful as the first time I saw them. The years of experience had given him an even more distinguished air, a mix of youthful charm and mature confidence that I couldn't look away from. I followed my heart and nodded. I do. But I don't have my ID. He smiled and pulled me out of the car. I brought it for you. Let's go, let's get our license. So after we get the license, are we going to pick up Nick? Louis looked back at me and laughed softly, leaning in to whisper in my ear, I've arranged everything for Nick. Dylan will have someone take good care of him. It's been so long. We should catch up. I've really learned a lot of new things. You can come and check my progress. At the very least. I can guarantee you won't get tired of me for the next 5 years. I finally understood why Dylan, when he took Nick from me, had emphasized that he'd bring him back tomorrow. Luckily, Nick isn't picky about where he sleeps and doesn't need to be coaxed to bed. In the crisp autumn wind of Beijing, Louis stood at the entrance of City Hall and held out his hand to me. Whatever the future held, in this moment, I just had to follow my heart. So, I placed my hand in his.